The centre of Amsterdam, hugging the Amstel River, going north and south. We'll talk you through it as the race unfolds. Starting and finishing in the Olympic Stadium, of course, host to the Olympic Games back in 1928, and as Martin said, more recently the European Championships just a few months ago.
Well, the athletes gathering on the start line. Here is Sami Khedira, a sub-2.5 man. Now that makes him world class, although such has been the progression of the marathon event over the course of the last decade or so that sometimes we look at times of 2:04, 2:05, and if not take them for granted, certainly look at them perhaps not as we once did. But Sami Khedira, certainly, Chris, one of the favourites here this morning.
Yes, making his debut in Amsterdam here, Bernard Kipyego, very much the man to beat, in form, going for a third successive victory here in Amsterdam, having won in 2014 and in 2015 last year. He's wearing bib number 1. And also a name to watch out for, Wilson Chebet, his 6th consecutive appearance here in Amsterdam, 3 times a winner. And he will be providing some stiff opposition. So Kenya and Ethiopia dominating, and that is the case in the women's race as well. There is Meselek Melkamu, one of the 2 main Ethiopians contesting the women's race. Priska Jeptu, a name I'm sure very familiar. There she is, centre of picture. Priska Jeptu, back from injury, having broken her leg. Many of you may remember in London in 2014, has had a torrid time with injury over the last couple of years, but she says she's back, really looking forward to racing in Amsterdam, and been quite specific, Martin, saying she'd be delighted if she can run 2:22.
Yes, and that would be a very fast time indeed on this course. And there you can see plenty of sun, and local time in Amsterdam coming up to 9:30. Meselek Melkamu coming here, an athlete who came into the marathon event with something of a bang with that very fast time in Frankfurt. Not long after she'd run sub half an hour for 10k, and Melkamu, an outstanding track runner, also has a good pedigree across the country, and she won that race in Frankfurt, and it looks as if she was going to go on and if not dominate world marathon running, certainly be an athlete who would win major city marathons. Well, it's not quite happened as maybe she'd planned, but I think in some respects she maybe lines up as the favourite for this women's race today. As you might expect of a race like this, we don't have the depth and quality that we do at one of the world marathon majors like London or New York or Chicago. But at the sharp end, we do have some outstanding athletes. And as you said there, Chris, it's Wilson Chebet, Bernard Kipyego, 2 men who have effectively owned this event for the last 5 years.
Very much vying to become Mr. Amsterdam, the unofficial title, of course, of the winner of this race. And here they go outside of the stadium. It really is a wonderful city. And we mentioned sunny conditions, around 9 degrees centigrade at the moment, due to rise to 18, 19 later in the morning. Minimal wind, blowing slightly to the northwest. Pretty good conditions, frankly, on a late October morning, Sunday morning. And we've got pacemakers, of course, who've been tasked with going through halfway in around 62:40. But we're going to keep an eye on numbers 1, 2 and 4 in particular in the men's race. I think I'm right in saying that all 3 of those, Martin, are wearing exactly the same kit.
Yes, that tends to be a feature at major road races these days. So let's keep an eye on the splits as and when we get them. Those will help us calculate the projected times, certainly looking to the half marathon point. And here you can see the start in the Olympic Stadium, starting on what is actually the finish line and running back down the home straight here. They then run something like 250 meters before peeling off to the left and going out into the city, and it's back through that same tunnel that they will re-enter at the end of the race.
16,500 people will be taking part from around 44,000 applications, so it continues to be a very popular successful marathon. They've got it down to a T of the organisers. 104 different nationalities taking part across the family. There's a group of races with a 10K and a half marathon. This, of course, is the centrepiece, the full marathon here on the Sunday morning. But it's been a weekend of running celebration in Amsterdam.
Yes, and they once they've turned out of the stadium, they make their way up Amstelpeensenweg through the first kilometre. Then into the main part of the city. They do move out of the city when they run along the banks of the Amstel River. At that part of the course, it really is just almost out and back, down one bank and then over a bridge at the bottom end of the course and then back, almost retracing their steps. But here you can see those leaders, the numbers in the 80s, referring to the numbers which have been designated to the race pacemakers. So in terms of the race proper, you can largely dismiss these athletes, but wearing 80 there is Ruben Mayo, 81 Albert Kangogo, 82 Edwin Kiptu. Wearing 28 there, looking quite prominent. Ronzes Kalimo making his marathon debut today. There is Sami Katwara, 2:04.28. So he comes here as the fastest man in the field.
29 years old. Personal best in Chicago last year. A time of just under 2:04.30.
Well, there you can see the familiar tram tracks, which seem to be on so many of the roads in Amsterdam. It certainly brings memories of that week I spent in Amsterdam using the trams to get between hotel and stadium for the European Championships. As Chris was saying, it really is a glorious city. And for marathon running as well, very flat.
And a great route which they've fine-tuned over the years. There are a couple of changes last year. There is Fundle Park, and that's one of the first main city attractions that this route goes through. Fundle Park, a wonderful, wonderful green space used all year round with cyclists and joggers and sunbathers in the summer. Always something going on in Fundle Park, and they're going north at the moment from the Olympic Stadium, and they've now just started cutting east, go the full length of Fundle Park, and then they'll come out into Museum Square, Museumsplein. Well, they'll hit the Reichstag Museum and all the familiar sights for those people who are familiar with the centre of Amsterdam.
Yes, and if you were watching the European Championships during the summer, the Rijksmuseum there, with that large green area in front of it, is where they held some of the throwing events, the qualifying competitions. The javelin throw is throwing the length there. It was certainly one of the most interesting features of those European Championships. So it's almost as if they're out into the country here, but very much in the heart of the city. They've been running now for almost 6 minutes, so through 2 kilometres.
Khalid Choukoud, who is one of the 2 leading Dutchmen in this field, and we're seeing quite a lot of him, I'm sure. 30 years old, and his 3rd ever marathon, along with Koen Remakers, who's wearing 18. I'm sure we'll get a glimpse of him very shortly as well. But Khalid Choukoud, 14th here last year, finished 7th in Rotterdam the year before that, so still relatively a novice, even at the age of 30, for Khalid Choukoud.
Well, to give you some idea, if we do get splits here, if these athletes are running 3-minute kilometres, that brings you through in about 2:06.36, and that could be a fairly decent stab at the time that these athletes are capable of running here.
Well, both the men and the women in the previews have talked about having a go at the course record, and it's worth just marking those early on here. Course record held by, in the men's race, Wilson Chebet. We've already mentioned him, 2:05.36. That was 3 years ago, and he is running today, as we've said. As is the women's course record holder, Meseret Hailu from Ethiopia, 2:21.09. That was 4 years ago. And Hailu will be wearing number 17.
Yes, the other Dutch competitor we've been alerted to, Koen Reemakers, who will be, well, he's capable of running very close to 2:10, so expect him maybe to be 4 or 5 minutes off the pace at the front of the field when he gets to the end. But we've already seen the two leading Dutch competitors in the men's race. But this is that leading group.
Blijf hier.
There is Melkamu, just tucked behind the athlete wearing 94, Azalech Melkamu.
Yes, as I was saying earlier, Melkamu really has got a fair range of distances and also disciplines, having done so well on the country and having broken 30 minutes for 10,000 metres. There is Koen Reemakers wearing 18. 2:10 man. Right to the front of the field.
Desperately disappointed last year just to fall short of the Olympic qualifying time in this race. Of course, this time last year it was all about qualification for Rio, and he and Michel Butters were just short in that attempt.
So they're wearing 28, Ronzas Kalimo, his marathon debut, and already starting to look a little concerned after he's only been on the road for 9 minutes. Just looking around, and the one thing he doesn't want to do is to get himself caught in no man's land. Certainly so early on between the pacemakers and the main pack as we go back to the stadium. These athletes, because of chip technology, their times will only start once they cross the start line, even though the leading men have been out there for almost 10 minutes. So the men's race through 10 minutes. The pacemakers there, all the numbers in the 80s. Keep an eye out for those, and we'll be back here in Amsterdam in a couple of moments' time. Well, the runners actually heading back towards the stadium now. They'll be going on to Stadionweg very shortly, the first clockwise loop before they start heading out of the city and making their way towards the south. And there you can see the Rijksmuseum, and the over to the left there, that's where they were using to throw javelins back in the summer.
It was a great idea, wasn't it? Really taking the athletics out of the stadium and to the people. And it was really well organised by all accounts, and a really good idea and a great way of showcasing. There are the leading group, obviously very early stages, approaching 4 kilometres, and we'll bring you the 5 kilometre split as soon as we have it, and that will give us a good indication as to what sort of pace these runners are on. But don't forget there are pacemakers in there as well, right at the front, wearing the vests in the 80s. There we are.
Yes, in the race proper, if you like, wearing 15 there, Daniel Wanjiru, 2:08 man, just tucked in behind the pacemakers there with 4. That is Wilson Chebet. So Chebet taking very close order at the moment. Also Abera Kumar of Ethiopia, as we tend to expect with major city marathons. There's another great clash between the two mighty East African running nations of Ethiopia and Kenya.
Completely dominated this event in recent years. In the men's event, 12 of the last 14 years have been won by Kenyans, the other 2 Ethiopians. It's as dominant as that.
Yes, and just looking through the entries in terms of the numbers of athletes, well, the leading 17 athletes all from Kenya. There is an American there, Fernando Kabada, wearing 21. We've got an athlete from Eritrea and Djibouti. But I think we can reasonably expect that the dust-up when we get towards the end will be between athletes from a combination of Ethiopia and Kenya. Let's Melkamu there in the dark vest in the middle of that group. Going out very strongly at the moment. Both the men's and women's races going off at the same time. So, oh, and there's a problem there at the drink station. And how many times do we talk about this? Wearing 4, Wilson Chebet, having missed his drink, stopping and going back down the road. And when you consider, Chris, how much time and also the break in rhythm that costs you, you do wonder quite why athletes do it. What, shouldn't they just move on and make sure that the next time, the next drink station, they do get a drink?
Well, particularly this early in the race, it's pretty cool conditions. It's not as though he needs the fluid at this stage of the race. As you say, an opportunity to make up for it at the next drink station. We'll see this again. Wilson Chebet then moving across, wearing 4, and then realizing he completely missed his own drink. These elite athletes, of course, have got personalized drinks with their names and numbers on them. And look at that. He will make up the distance, of course, but he's got to, you know, refine his rhythm, regain his rhythm, as you say. And there he is already back in the leading group. We'll bring you that 5K split. All of that happened just before the 5-kilometer mark.
And in the end, he didn't get the drink that he was hoping to pick up. So there is Chebet now, and he's running again and with the leading group. But it's not the break in rhythm that any athlete really wants. Course record holder, 2:05.36 from 3 years ago. It's the 41st running, so into its 5th decade. 31 there, Fredrik Urbom of Sweden. Here we can see the leading women again, and they're one of the favourites, Priska Jeptu, in that leading group. She's wearing F2, you can see her. So this is the 5-kilometre mark for the women, through in just inside 17 minutes. And once again, another athlete stopping there to go back and pick up a drink. And, well, that's Eunice Chumba, F6. Former East African, now runs for Bahrain.
Further back, still they come, going through the start line, the 16,000 plus runners who've turned out for this 41st Amsterdam Marathon. All with personal stories to tell, challenges. Could get a little bit warm for some of these athletes as they approach the finish later on in, what, 3, 4, 5 hours' time. But what a thrill to be able to say you started the Amsterdam Marathon in the Olympic Stadium with all the history that venue has.
Yes, the architecture of the time when it comes to sporting stadia. Not quite as striking as the Stockholm Olympic Stadium, but constructed, relatively speaking, at a similar time. Well, the opening 10Ks or so, there are a couple of loops. The athletes here who have made their way down Stadionweg, they'll have seen the stadium at the end of the street and then taken another sharp left-hand turn to go down Beethovenstraat. And then go out and back. It's another 3-kilometre loop before going back and almost retracing their steps for a relatively short period. So there you go, that's the first split. So we are running at basically 2:59 a kilometre.
Pretty even pace for that very large group. Just a gap opening up there as the pacemakers, of course, continuing to do their job. And then a bit of a gap to that pack of, what, 15 or so runners.
It's far too early to start predicting finish times, but this tempo is 2:06.5, something like that. It has become quite normal for racers these days to pick up the cadence, pick up the tempo as they go through it. So every chance that we could challenge the course record that has rather dominated the headlines and the run-up to this Amsterdam Marathon. 2:05.36, the standard set by Wilson Jebet 3 years ago. And at the back of that group, you can see they're wearing 5. Muli Waishun of Ethiopia. They've been running now for 20 minutes, so heading towards the 7-kilometre mark.
Good shot of the business district there in Amsterdam as they go south down Beethovenstraat towards the 8-kilometre mark, and then they'll turn back on themselves and go north before then starting to make their way towards the Amstel River, which then will dominate the course for the next few kilometres.
So one or two quite tight twists and turns there at the bottom of the course as they make their way towards the 8-kilometre mark, and the 3 pacemakers still at the front: Ruben Mayo, Albert Kangogo and Edwin Kiptu, 80, 81 and 82. And this is the sport park, Buitenveldert. Number 9 there, right at the back of that leading group. That's Felix Kandi, the Kenyan, 2:07 man. Alongside him, number 41, he's the Ethiopian, Dereje Tesfaye.
Amsterdam, a good example, Martin, isn't it, of where to get a 42-kilometre full marathon course as compactly laid out within a big city like Amsterdam inevitably involves doing some loops, some tight loops, to get the distance in without going too far out of the city. People often wonder why the course can't be made quicker with having fewer loops, but that is the reason why. Otherwise, you'd have to take it right outside.
Yes, and there is that stretch, we've already mentioned it, alongside the Amstel River. They hit the banks of the Amstel River between the 13 and 14-kilometre mark, and they run all the way down to the far end where they reach 19 kilometres, so a stretch of something like 6 kilometres. They cross the bridge and then they come back up the other bank for another 6 kilometres, so that covers a distance of somewhere between 12 and 13 k's before they then re-enter the city.
It certainly has got a reputation as being one of the fastest marathons in terms of times over the last few years. It's in the top 10. It's 8th on the list currently. Fast, flat and friendly is the motto that they use of this marathon, and I think justifiably so. As Martin said, not the high profile of the 6 world marathon majors, the Berlins, the Londons and the Bostons and Chicagos, but certainly in that second tranche of big city marathons, and attracts decent names. The fact that Priska Jeptu is here is a feather in the cap, I think.
Yes, very good chance that that women's race will end up being a joust between her and Meslech Melkamu. So 80, 81 and 82, the 3 pacemakers out in front where you'd expect them to be. Dereje Tesfaye, they're wearing 41, becoming a little bit detached. 2:08 athlete. And he will be mindful that he really wants to latch himself onto the back of that group. Does not want to find himself on his own so early in the race. There's another of those sections of the course where you can see it's the out and back section where athletes a good deal further behind, just on the other side of the carriageway.
Daniel Wanjiru there wearing 15, one of the many Kenyans, 2:08 athlete. Really is great strength in depth here in terms of sub 2:09 runners. But just Kitwara, Sami Kitwara, wearing number 2, the only sub 2:05 runner in this field.
We are entering that area of the city where we have roads named after some of the world's great leaders of recent history. They're turning right in a couple of moments' time onto Churchill Lawn. Just around the corner is Roosevelt Lawn and also President Kennedy Lawn. So they've turned right now, making their way towards 10 kilometres. So we'll get the 10K split very shortly.
Yeah, heading due east pretty much along Churchill Lawn. And then from there, after about 11 kilometres, they'll drop, hang a right and go south again, and then another right to do another loop. So it's a succession of fairly tight loops before, as we mentioned earlier on, around 13 kilometres, they eventually get to the banks of the Amsterdam, and we'll see some very, very impressive real estate.
Yes. The athletes on the right, by the way, they're running between 5 and 6 kilometres. This is just that short stretch of the Stadionweg, the road which leads down to the Olympic Stadium. But the leaders will be peeling off to the right down Churchill Lawn in a couple of moments' time. So there you can see Melkamu and also Jeptu.
Jeptu done very well to get herself back into shape after that horrendous injury in 2014, one of several injuries that she's had to cope with, but she says she's back. She's operated right at the top of the marathon running game, winning in London and Paris and New York, and those are big, big victories.
So focusing again on the race to be the leading Dutch competitor, Khalid Chakoud. Chakoud wearing 19. Look out for Koen Raymakers. He's got 18 on his chest. So those, well, it's certainly been teed up as the race between those two athletes to be the first Dutchman across the line. So very close now to 10K. In half an hour. We'll be just outside 2 hours 6.5. This is one of the features I find of Amsterdam, in a country like the Netherlands, which is so densely populated. You can walk through Amsterdam, the biggest city, and not really feel as if it's ever terribly busy. It really does seem to be a very well planned and organised part of the world. So going through 10 kilometres there inside half an hour.
It's a breezy pace, isn't it? And if they can keep this up, we may well be on for a course record, but still a long, long way to go in this particular race. Yes, it's a very, very pleasant city. It's very warm in the summer, but this is a great time of the year to go. Very cycle-friendly, of course, has a reputation for being one of the best examples of town planning, and most people take to the bikes rather than their cars.
Yes, trams, roads, cycle lanes. Almost every street has this sort of bank of bikes you can see there. Those are relatively modest examples of that. You can see over to the side of the road. Bikes just parked and chained up. Well, the pace inside now 2:06, so you're spot on there, Chris. We are looking at a tempo which will take us within sight of a course record, but still very, very early days. Bear in mind, we are barely a quarter of the way into this Amsterdam Marathon. Well, it's an opportune time to return to the women's race, just passing through 10 kilometres in something like 33:46. That is set to be confirmed. We do have official times for the men's splits at 10K, 29:48 or thereabouts, isn't it, Chris? So we're looking at a time at the moment on a tempo of 2:06, maybe a shade inside, certainly if they pick up the tempo. So in the men's race, at least, that course record very much a reasonable target.
Very much so. And interestingly, 18 athletes going through 10 kilometres in the men's race in 29:48 or 49, give or take a second. So still plenty of competition in the early stages of this race. Priska Jeptu looking pretty comfortable. There is Meseret Hailu as well, the course record holder, of course, in the women's race, wearing 17, the red vest there. Set that course record back in 2012. Again, good pedigree. Hailu, second place in Boston, third in Berlin, second in Hamburg early this year.
So something like 1.5 kilometres further up on the road, we join the men. Rijnstraat is the next street that the men will be going on to, making their way towards Martin Luther King Park. Now moving out a little bit into the country, I suppose, making their way towards the Amstel River. The banks of the Amstel not terribly far away now. There will be another straight stretch, a right-hand turn, and another hairpin bend before they come back down President Kennedy Lane, and then the long straight stretch where it's very, very quiet and peaceful down by the river. So the leading men, and the main name still up there, Felix Candy, right at the back of that group, wearing 7, Laban Correa, 2:06.05 man. Sami Kitwari, you can see, wearing 2. There's Bernard Kipyego, wearing 1. Kipyego, defending champion, of course. Winner of the last 2 races here in Amsterdam.
Very much emerging as one of the new, perhaps less familiar names in Kenyan marathon running. Have been obviously sport for choice in the last decade or so, but Kipyego said he's very much aiming for selection for the Kenyan team for the World Championships in London next summer. Very much on his radar. Very, very impressive second place in Tokyo early this year, behind Faisa Lelisa, the Ethiopian.
So there is the, for a moment at least, there was the familiar gait of Meselech Melkamu. So as you'd expect, leading men here running very much within themselves, even though, believe me, they are going at a fair old clip. 3 minutes a kilometre or thereabouts.
Those of you who are experienced marathon runners and watchers will know that the real racing often only really gets underway after 30 kilometres. So these early stages very much, although they're running at impressive tempo, it's a bit like a Sunday morning training run, isn't it? When you see them in that pack.
Well, they certainly look like they're on one. I tell you what, if you try to run with them, you would discover just how quickly they are moving. They make running at a very fast tempo look incredibly relaxed. And there is that hairpin turn at the bottom of Kennedy Lane. And it's those turns which take the edge off the course in terms of a fast road, because it really does break up the tempo. But it's still 80, 81 and 82. The pacemakers out in front in the race proper. Wilson Chebet, who we saw stop on the road, turn around, go back to pick up a drink, which wasn't there for him. He's back among the leading athletes, just tucked in behind the pacemakers there. Bernard Kipyego has Chebet in his sights. One is Kipyego, 4 is Chebet, 7 over to the right is Laban Correa. And as you'd expect, the field, well, the head of the field, dominated by East Africans. Yes, when we left for the most recent break, just as we turned pictures, we saw Momingala wearing 24. You might have caught that yourselves, from Djibouti, just stepping off to the left-hand side of the road. So if you do have any sort of interest in that athlete, the news appears to be that he's stepped off the road. So leading group here in the high teens in numbers. Just struggling again a little bit towards the back. It's Felix Candy wearing 9. But the pacemakers ensuring that this tempo at just inside 3 minutes a kilometre is being maintained.
Amsterdam Marathon on a wonderful, bright, sunny October morning, approaching the 14-kilometre mark, and the leading men there making their way metre by metre towards the Amstel River, which will dominate this course for the next dozen or so kilometres. They're going to go south along the right-hand bank all the way down to the most southerly point of this Amsterdam Marathon course at about 19 kilometres, cross the bridge and then go back along the opposite bank northbound. And well, it does make for some very, very televisually impressive pictures, doesn't it, Martin? It really is a great, great sight, the Amstel River, the windmills and the palatial houses in some cases.
Yes, and it's also that section where it does look like a Sunday morning run.
Well, indeed, it's a very popular run for local Amsterdam residents, who I'm sure will use the very same banks on any other Sunday morning except this one to do their Sunday run.
Yes, and these are those twists and turns out of the Martin Luther King Park before moving on to the Amstel Dijk, and there is the river. They'll be running down the right-hand bank there, all the way down to around about the 19-kilometre mark before crossing over the bridge and then back up the left-hand side. So the river will appear to the left very shortly. Indeed, there it is.
Inevitable breeze as they hit the water. Temperature probably edging towards 9 or 10 degrees now.
And the numbers being whittled down in that leading group, but Felix Candy, number 9, still hanging on to the back of the group. Towards the back there is Mulwashiun of Ethiopia. Athletes moving out of the centre of the city, you can see there. So the 3 pacemakers pretty much where they've been throughout. 82, Edwin Kiptu. 81, Albert Kangogo. 80, Ruben Mayo. Bernard Kipyego, Wilson Chebet, winners of the last 5 runnings of this race between them. Just tucked in behind those 3 leaders at the moment.
Done a good job, haven't they, the pacemakers? An often underestimated task. Many pacemakers, of course, go on to become well-known runners in their own right. And here we are, about to go onto the main ring road. There you can see the E10, for those of you who know your Amsterdam roads, or the A10, I should say. One of the main arteries into and out of Amsterdam. And this fella is here every year, isn't he?
So back to the roads. Felix Candy in his position, which he's assumed for quite a while now, alongside here Mulwashiun, the Ethiopian, just in front, wearing 17, Marius Kimutai of Kenya. Kimutai is a 209 athlete. Wearing 7, that's Laban Korea, 206.05 athlete.
Approaching 15 kilometres. We'll see the balloons that mark the 15k mark appear any moment now, and meanwhile, it's quite impressive, isn't it, actually?
Yes, we mentioned Laban Corrier in that leading group, second in the Paris Marathon. You may well have seen that on Eurosport back in April at the start of the spring season, going through 15 kilometres inside 45 minutes, so sub 3 minutes a kilometre. So anything round about 44, 45, that's 2:05.50-ish. So certainly at the moment, Chris, that course record very much in sight.
It is indeed. They're pushing it well, and the good news is there are enough athletes in that leading group still to keep this paced honest, and it's not just down to one or two. Course record, remember, set by Wilson Chebet in 2013. 2:05.36. So as this race unfolds, we'll get a clearer and clearer idea of how feasible that is. Of course, once we get into 35+ kilometers, the racing starts, and then there'll be, depending on how competitive it is, whether we're in racing mode towards the end, that could bring that time down.
Yes, looking back over the history of the race, we've had some very famous winners, none more famous, of course, than Haile Gebrselassie, who won the race 11 years ago. He ran 2:06.20. That was the same year that Kutra Delecha won the women's race in just outside 2.5 hours. Also looking at some of the other former winners, Geta Wami won the women's race in 2002 when she ran 2:22. Emmanuel Mutai, former London Marathon winner, 2:06.29 when he won the race in 2007. So it is a race with a pretty rich heritage. Oh, you mentioned the windmills. There is one of them there on the right, and it's now an opportunity to do our bit for the local tourist board. The race itself does that pretty well, Chris.
It does a great job, doesn't it, of showcasing Amsterdam, taking in all the sights and sounds, as all the big city marathons aim to do. Most of them do it very, very well indeed. Huge organisation, of course, involved, closing the streets, the cooperation of the local police and the city authorities. But what a sight this is. Perfect conditions here in Amsterdam. We're just waiting for confirmation of those 15-kilometre splits, but we can tell you definitely sub 45 minutes.
So another 3 kilometres or so to do along Amsteldyke. That's the bank essentially running alongside the Amstel River before they make that sharp left-hand turn over the bridge and then essentially retrace their steps on the opposite bank. So 44-43, that was that split at 15 kilometres. So again, inside 2:06 pace. And the 3 pacemakers just kicking on a little bit here. They have to be mindful. Their job is to maintain a tempo, and you can see 1 or 2 of them there just looking behind and just checking to see where the main field are and quite what they're doing. This is Sami Katwara. Very easy to fall in love with running, isn't it, on a Sunday morning? Brilliant blue skies, running alongside the river.
Approaching the hour mark in the 41st Amsterdam Marathon, and the leading men and women are making their way south along the banks of the Amstel River. And what a beautiful setting it is on a bright, cool, perfect October morning in the Netherlands. And just the first signs now of the field being stretched out. There is Khalid Choukoud, the leading Dutch runner, who's some way off the pace of the leaders, of course, as you would expect, but very much competing against the likes of Koen Remakers for the Dutch Championship. And there is the leading group. Still 18 athletes, actually, went through that 15-kilometre mark together, just as they'd done through 10 kilometres. And we are still on sub 2:06 hour pace. So a course record, as things stand, is still on anywhere near the halfway stage yet. And I can tell you that the women went through 15 kilometres unofficially in just outside 50 minutes, 50:36 or something like that, which puts them at a finishing time of around 2:22, which, unlike the men, would be outside the main course record. The course record set by Meseret Hailu, who is in that leading group. Course record of 2:21.09, set in 2012.
Well, as you might expect, this is just about the quietest part of the route, down to the southernmost point. And further back down the road, and the women's race now alongside the banks of the Amstel. And still you can see half a dozen women there in that leading group. There is Meselech Melkamu. Also there was Meseret Hailu, the Ethiopian with that course record.
Abebech Afewalk as well, another Ethiopian wearing F4, winner of Rotterdam and Houston. 25 years old.
Yes, you certainly get the impression that the depth here in the women's race is that much better than it has been in the past.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the big famous names who've won the men's race here over the years. Think of Tiki Galana in terms of the women's race. Former winner here. And those are the leading men. Group of 18, plus the pacemakers, still doing a great job, wearing 80, 81 and 82 at the front. And
number 6, Abera Kuma, 2:05.56 athlete. Looking very, very relaxed indeed is Kuma. Laban Correa also in that leading group there, the winner of the Toronto Marathon a couple of years ago, second in Paris back in April when he ran 2:07.29.
Chance, Martin, perhaps in this quieter section to just reflect on the more recent results that I'm sure many people watching will have spotted. The brilliant performance of Kenenisa Bekele in Berlin, 2:03.03, second fastest ever marathon time. Again, any doubt that marathon running at the top end is in good shape, and again, Berlin once again producing world record or close to world record performances.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's flat, very much like this course, but what it doesn't have, which this course does have, are those short, sharp turns. I mean, Berlin really has established itself as the world record course, and Kenenisa Bekele, who's, well, he seems to have been around for years and years and years, and he's had so many injury problems, but coming through with that stunning run.
Yeah, it really was. Dennis Kimetto, of course, still the reigning world record holder. 2:02.57, also set in Berlin, almost inevitably.
David Barmasai wearing 11, also in that leading group, 2:07 athlete. Yes, it's quite an occasion really for David Barmasai, because he's got a string of marathon victories to his name, but all in, or largely, races of relatively small import. Most recently won in Eldoret, so that's back at home in Kenya, and run at altitude. His winning time there, 2:16. It's the altitude of that Eldoret marathon, 2,100 meters, so more than 6,000 feet, so that really is pretty extreme altitude to be running a marathon.
I can tell you I've done a little bit of running at just even higher than Eldoret in E10 a couple of years ago. Just a few kilometers, and I can tell you, you know you've done it.
I lived in Johannesburg for quite a few years, which is at a very similar altitude. And no, you're absolutely right.
Well, the leading group will be hitting 19 kilometers very shortly and making that sharp turn left across the bridge over the Amstel, and then they'll retrace their steps on the opposite side northbound, and very quickly will come towards the halfway point of this marathon.
Yes, back to the women's field, and Meselech Melkamu in there. Let's try and identify. Well, we don't have an opportunity now, but we're going forward to the men again, and Ronsas Kalimo of Kenya there making his debut. He's had a slightly erratic race. Do you remember very early on he got himself caught in that gap between the pacemakers and the main field? Well, he's starting to slip back before halfway. And here you can see the bottom of the course. This is the left-hand turn, followed by another one once they've got to the other side of the bridge, back along the banks, and essentially retracing their steps, albeit separated by the Amstel River. And it's certainly a turn which gives the athletes a bit of a lift, because they will sense that they're heading their way back to the centre of the city.
Yeah, not quite halfway yet, but psychologically you're absolutely right. They've reached the most southerly point of the whole course.
Well, the river will appear on the left very shortly. So Wilson Jabet within this leading group. Coming to Amsterdam has become something of an annual event for him. Three-time winner. Sami Kitwara just breaking up the dominance of the pacemakers towards the front. 7 is Lavan Correa on the left. 5, Muli Washiun on the right. 9, that's Felix Candy right at the back of this leading group. 15 is Daniel Wanjiru, 2:08 man. So the river on the pathway on the side here of the river, almost forcing the athletes to go down to something close to Indian file, and they're just a bit of grabbing and dropping of water bottles. The pacemaker out in front just ensuring he gets a clear run. Edwin Kiptu wearing 82. Kitwara using the opportunity as well just to kick on a little bit. He looks fairly confident and full of himself.
Well, the pace in the last 5 kilometres has dropped slightly. The 20-kilometre mark, still waiting for official confirmation, but as you saw there, going through 20 kilometres in just outside 60 minutes. So it has dipped a little bit.
Just caught a glimpse there going across the bridge of number 21, Fernando Cabada, who is the leading American in the field, although he has yet to break 2:10. He's a 2:11 man. So the women making their way, still down the right-hand bank of the river.
And it's one of the pacemakers who's just dropped off the main group there. I'll bring you confirmation of those 20-kilometre split times very shortly.
Yes, Edwin Kiptu is now kicking on. Perhaps he's reaching the end of his period when he is contracted, if you like, to take ahead the field. He's certainly opening up his stride and looking very relaxed. Just behind him is Albert Kangogo. Those, the two remaining pacemakers out in front. The Amstel meandering. There you saw Kabada again, tall athlete wearing the dark vest, 23. That's Kasheti of Eritrea, just slowing down at that drinks table. And then 19, that's Khaled Choukoud, the leading Dutchman at the moment. Just behind him wearing 42, Workney Fikra of Ethiopia, a 2:13 athlete. So Choukoud and Kabada, the leading Dutchman, the leading American, running together. It really is a perfect morning for marathon running. Through the halfway mark, 2 or 1:03.18 or thereabouts. So, well, 2:06.30, somewhere of that sort of region, I would have thought. So at the moment, they're slipping off the course record schedule by something like a minute.
It's going to take a negative split, isn't it, to challenge that course record, and it all depends on what the racing situation is like in the latter stages of the event. How many of those 18 athletes are still in contention, whether they can push themselves on.
Yes, for those not familiar with some of the terminology, when you talk about a negative split in marathons, it's actually running the second half faster than the first. So the negative element is just how much faster you run the second half of the race to the first. So we're going to need to see a negative split by something like a minute in the second half if we are to have a course record here. It now seems perhaps unlikely.
So hard to do, but it's become something of a trend in modern marathon running, certainly in Berlin. Many of the world record performances we've been referring to, many of those have been negative splits, as we've just described. But anybody who's run a marathon knows it's, well, as a club runner or a casual runner, just completing the course is an extraordinary effort in itself, never mind running the second half of the 26.2 miles or 42 kilometers quicker than the first.
So F4, Ababech Apawok, there of Ethiopia. F3, Masalech Malkamu, just behind Apawok. And half a dozen women in that leading group, so plenty of depth there in the women's race. Meanwhile, on the opposite bank, there we get confirmation of those midway race splits. 63.18. Among them, Bernard Kipyego, the winner of the last two Amsterdam marathons. Sami Kitwara, very prominent indeed there, wearing 2. Just behind him, David Barmasai, the 11 bib. Pacemaker there wearing 82. Edwin Kiptoo still out in front.
Interesting little adjustment there to report, Martin, that at 15 kilometers there were 18 athletes going through in almost identical times, and at the halfway mark, those split times we just saw there, that was down to 16. So just a couple of athletes just starting to lose a little bit of ground, not by much, but a little bit of ground off the back there. So 18 and now down to a group of 16.
So Kun Raymakers comes through the halfway mark in just a little over 66.5 minutes. So at the moment he's running on a schedule of something like 2:13. And as you saw on that graphic, this is the official Dutch National Championship. So Khaled Choukoud and Koen Raymakers competing for that. Sami Kitwara on the right, wearing 2. 14 is Sami Correa. 12, that's Ezekiel Chebai. 11, David Barmasai. The leading men barely moving a muscle, allowing the pacemaker to do much of the work. At the back of the field there, Felix Candy, the back of that leading group. So we're into the second half of the Amsterdam Marathon, and we'll be back on the streets of Amsterdam very shortly. Now looking back across the Amstel River, you can see in the foreground the leading men, and over on the far side athletes who are perhaps now round about 14 or 15 kilometres or so into the race. So some very decent club runners there on the opposite bank. There they are, running in the shadow of the windmill. Meanwhile, as we pan left, we see the leading men. And it's still the pacemaker, wearing 82, who's done a very sterling job here as Edwin Kiptoo. Sami Kitwara growing in confidence. Jeffrey Karui there with that very characteristic arm carriage there, almost as if he's got his fists clenched. So Kitwara on the right, the pacemaker there, 13, Jeffrey Karui. There is Dibaba Kumar in the women's race. The women making their way towards the halfway mark. Here you can see 21.1 kilometres, that is halfway. Coming through in round about 71.22 or 23, something like that. Yes, Jeffrey Karui there in third place, third in the Rotterdam Marathon earlier this year. He's a former African junior champion at the 10,000 metres. That's going back to 2011. Some very decent performances on the tracks as well of Europe. He's run that traditional 10K in Brussels towards the end of the Diamond League season on a couple of recent occasions. Has broken 27 minutes, so he's no slouch at the 10,000 metres, Jeffrey Karui, to say the least.
Leading pack just starting to break up a little bit there. That is number 7, Laban Correa, just having to work perhaps a little bit harder to keep on the coattails of the rest of the group. Sami Kitwara, though, right at the front of that group, looking very, very comfortable indeed on his Amsterdam Marathon debut. As you can see, they're now coming back towards the ring road, the A10. We left, what, half an hour or so ago. Coming back into the centre of Amsterdam and heading towards the 25-kilometre mark, where again they'll make another sharp right turn.
Yes, there is then a long anti-clockwise loop through the east of the city before they return towards the Olympic Stadium and the conclusion. So there is Kitwara on the right, wearing 2, 82, the pacemaker who has been there throughout, Edwin Kiptoo. Jeffrey Karui there on the left. Karui was actually a medalist over 10,000 metres in the World Junior Championships a few years ago now. And here you can see the race for the Dutch title. Kali Chakoud. Behind him, the American there, Fernando Cabada. Further up the road, David Barmasai beginning to get dropped. There is Barmasai, 2:07 man.
Yeah, this is the starting to get to the crucial stage of the race. That tranche of 10 kilometers between 25 and 35 can so often shake things up. There is number 9, Felix Kendi, another Kenyan, again just having to work a little bit harder as they go through 25 kilometers in just under 1:15. So it's quickened again.
So they've now been going for 75 minutes. And Coutuara, well, he's barely moving a muscle, isn't he? Just behind there, the pacemaker, Coutuara on the right-hand side of the screen. It's a stunning autumnal day in Amsterdam. Not a breath of wind. Perfect conditions for running a marathon.
Will we see a course record, though? That's the question. It was looking much less likely at the halfway stage. They dropped back between 20 and 25, but they seem to have got a little bit quicker in the last few kilometers. Just wait for confirmation of the 25-kilometer split. They're about a minute down, weren't they? That's a lot of time to make up. Leading women. Could have an interesting race here, Martin, as well, couldn't we, in the women's race? All the main protagonists still in there. Priska Jeptu, Melkamu, Karimi, Meseret Hailu, the course record holder, wearing the red vest. You can just see the other side of the gentleman wearing 37.
Yes, the orange vest there of Yunus Chumba as well. The sights and sounds of the Amsterdam Marathon, the 41st running of the race. The last 5 runnings dominated by 2 men. Wilson Jabet, the course record holder. Bernard Kipyego, the winner of the last 2 events.
Always a good sight to see somebody on a bicycle, because it just confirms, as if we needed it, how quickly these guys are running. Somebody having to pedal reasonably briskly to keep up with them.
Yes, the tempo, you actually have to be on the side of the street to really appreciate just how quick these men are. 3 minutes a kilometre. So if you try running at something like 20 kilometres an hour on a treadmill down at the gym, that'll give you some idea. Very, very hard indeed. So the leading Dutchman there, Chicou, going through 25 kilometres. Chicou there in the, it's almost motorway maintenance yellow, isn't it? Fluorescent yellow vest there of the leading Dutchman at the moment.
Nice cadence, though, looking very, very smooth and relaxed still. Several minutes down, of course, on the leading pack, but looking pretty unruffled is the Dutchman.
Yes, he is yet to break 2:10. But certainly this morning, a lot of things in his favour.
Pacemakers for the leading women. And we can see Meseret Melkamu still there, centre of picture. Still looking pretty comfortable.
Yes, that time in the 10,000 metres, 29:53.83 she ran. Very, very fast indeed. Not too many women in the world have run as fast as that. She hit the marathon world with a real bang back in 2012 when she ran 2:21.01 on her debut in Frankfurt, and she hasn't been able to improve that When she won in Hamburg earlier this year, she came relatively close, ducking just inside 2:22. But Malkamu, certainly one of the women here with real pedigree.
David Barmeside has definitely been dropped here. He's having to work extremely hard. That's the gap. And once that gap appears, it's so difficult to get it back. You're working very hard on your own. You don't have the luxury of sharing the duties with any of your competitors. And there's no doubt about it, the tempo has been picked up again in this last 5-kilometre tranche.
Yes, you saw number 17 there, Marius Kimatai, the Kenyan. 2'9" man, just looking across as if to say, look, how you all going, fellas? He apparently running well within himself at the moment. Local time in Amsterdam, just coming up to 10 to 11 in the morning.
Meanwhile, Sami Katwara continues to look very comfortable indeed. Distinctive forward lean that so many of the Kenyan athletes have.
It's Jeffrey Karui there wearing 13 in second place. 16, that's Amos Kipruto. His best 2:08.12. Bernard Kipyego, the winner for the last couple of years, has run a pretty quiet race here, has not shown himself towards the front, but he's still looking very strong, isn't he? Alongside him wearing 6, that's Abera Kuma. In the background, Daniel Wanjiru, another Kenyan in the field there wearing 15. But Sami Katwara leading the race proper, if you like, just behind the last remaining pacemaker. Then in third place on the road as we look at it here, Jeffrey Karui, the former world junior medalist at the 10,000 metres. 16, that's Amos Kipruto. Bernard Kipyego just looking incredibly comfortable behind him. Wearing 15 is Wanjiru. So still a fair number of men in with a real chance of winning this Amsterdam Marathon.
Well, it's all shaping up to be very watchable indeed in the final 15 kilometres. If we've got even, say, 10 guys still in contention, Martin, at 35 kilometres or so, that could have a real race on our hands. They're currently in the east of the city, heading towards 30 kilometres. They'll be there in around 1 hour 30.
Yes, there is that long anti-clockwise loop over to the east of the course before they make their way back towards the city at something like the 35-kilometre mark. And then they go back across the Amstel between the 36th and 37th kilometres.
Okay, guys. Yes, keep going, keep going. Okay, Joffrey, okay, Sammy, okay.
It's reasonable to assume one of the agents or agents' representatives there on the left on a bike, just giving the athletes a bit of encouragement. Still a big group here.
It is, and it's actually quite rare, isn't it, to see this many of the main contenders still in contention at this stage of the race, approaching 30 kilometres. Normally by now we've maybe whittled down all but, say, 3 or 4. This is still very keen and earnest. And all the big names, all the main protagonists are still in there.
Yeah, something like 42 minutes or so of running to go in the men's race. Sami Katwara, one of the 3 out in front there. Katuara on the right, wearing 2. On the left there, Jeffrey Karui, 13. Ezekiel Chebai, 12, in the black vest. And 16, that is Amos Kipruto. But these men here starting to get down to business.
Well, approaching 30 kilometres, and the racing, you sense, about to start. Often the handbrake comes off after 30 kilometres. We're about 5 minutes away from that in the east of Amsterdam on a wonderful, warm, autumnal morning in Amsterdam. Very competitive race in the women's event as well. There's Jeffrey Karui, one of the 2 leading athletes at the moment, along with Sami Kutwara, just flanking the pacemaker in the centre of picture there. These 3, just a little bit of a gap ahead of the rest of the field, but essentially we've still got a group of around 10 athletes all together. We're going to take a short break, and we'll bring you the culmination of this race in a few minutes. Approaching 30 kilometres in the 41st Amsterdam Marathon in bright sunshine here. And, well, we've still got a group of 12 or 13 Kenyan and Ethiopian athletes all in contention here, including the 2-time defending champion Bernard Kipyego. Sami Kutwara wearing 2. Just a little bit of a gap opening up now between the first 2, along with the pacemaker, and the rest of the field. It's not big, but it is opening up a little bit. How significant might that be? It's no more than 3 or 4 meters at this stage, but as the clock approaches an hour and a half and the 30-kilometer mark, could that be decisive? These 3 have been setting the pace for the last couple of kilometers or so, and just tucking in behind the pacemaker there, wearing 82 there. You can see one of the other athletes just joining Kutwara and Karui, just closing that gap. That is number 5, Muri Wazihun. And there is the 30-kilometer mark.
Yes, you rather feel that maybe there are 1 or 2 athletes behind there who are feeling that the elastic is being stretched. For others, they may be quite comfortable in allowing a little bit of extra tempo to be applied from the front through 30 kilometres, so a little more than 12 kilometres to go. But Sami Kutwara, I think it's reasonable to assume that he's feeling very strong indeed out in front. Bernard Kipyego just having to pick up his cadence a little bit.
Well, in terms of predicting a finishing time, we're still looking at around 2:06. I think the course record may be beyond this group today, although they have shaved something off the halfway point. They were about a minute down on course record pace at the halfway stage. They're inside that now, probably nearer to 40-45 seconds. So it is still possible, but of course they're running out of kilometres. And Martin mentioned about people used to running on the treadmill. That is the average speed there, just under 20 kilometres an hour.
Yes, you can see that little spike, can't you, round about in that section, around about 25 kilometres there, where the pace was picked up that little bit, but speed average, as you say, just inside 20 kilometres an hour. It is quite stunning, really, isn't it, when you consider and compare that with your jogging paces on the treadmill down at the gym. And these men have been knocking out this sort of tempo for more than 90 minutes. But they are being strung out, there's no doubt about that. And 82 came here as a pacemaker. Well, he's still looking very strong indeed, is Edwin Kiptoo. But they're beginning to close up behind him just a little bit. Jeffrey Karui there, wearing 13. Broad shoulders. That rather characteristic arm carriage there. It's almost as if he's got his fists clenched.
Those split times, as you can see, playing catch-up a little bit there through 25 kilometres, and of course they've just gone through 30. So I'll bring you those 30k splits very shortly, but we can tell you that it was comfortably inside 1 hour 30.
Well, there is Wilson Chebet, and Chebet is dropping off the pace here. That's something like 10 meters or so he's behind the field now. So the man who was such a big figure in the history of this race, course record holder, well, he's rocking and rolling now, and this is far too early in the race, I think, to be losing that sort of distance on the leaders. So his race not yet run, but he certainly is beginning to hurt.
Well, he still has 11 kilometres and a little bit of small change to go, and that is a big surprise here. Wilson Chebet, 6th consecutive appearance here in Amsterdam, 3 times a winner, 3 years in succession in 2011, 12 and 13, and was 2nd in 2010, so he has an excellent record here in Amsterdam. But there you can see on the right of picture, the gap is getting wider and wider, and all the while at the front, right of shot there, Sami Kitwara continues to look extremely comfortable.
Let's just consider for a moment Edwin Kiptoo out in front, who has been there throughout. He was sharing the early pace with Ruben Mayo and Albert Kangogo, the other 2 pacemakers, 80 and 81. They've long gone. But Edwin Kiptoo, still a youngster, just 23, bowling along in front there. Even now, not looking in any great discomfort. The same could be said of, well, certainly 8 men there. Wilson Chebet just starting to get himself onto the back of the group again, but you do wonder the next time we might see a sustained attack from the front of the field. Chebet will probably go and disappear, certainly for the rest of today. But just behind the pacemaker there, 6 or 7 men who are looking equally relaxed.
Just got a first shot or two of Mule Wazihun, and it's worth mentioning that he's surrounded by Kenyan opposition. 22 years old, wearing number 5. We'll get a glimpse of him in just a moment. Just tucked in behind the pacemaker there, making his Amsterdam debut. And he is a real threat as well. 2:05.44 he's run, set in Dubai this year. There he is, number 5, in the centre of picture there, looking very, very comfortable indeed.
Well, most of the twists and turns have now gone from the course until we get right to the end and the Olympic Stadium. So this is almost the best running stretch of the route, and 1 or 2 athletes there just making sure that they're covering every move, and now the pacemaker has moved to one side. So eventually he's decided his job is done, Edwin Kiptoo, and he steps off, and that coincides with Laban Correa kicking his way to the front. So it's Laban Correa in the lead, putting his head down and certainly putting in that first sustained burst that we talked about. And look at Wilson Chebet right at the back, having got himself latched onto the back of his group again, having done a huge amount of work. The moment that Laban Correa kicked, and also took with him there Jeffrey Karui, well, Chebet went straight out of the back. And look here at Karui. Really is a running style all of his own. It's almost as if his head is tilted slightly to the left. And there is Chebet, falling further and further behind. That is now more than 20 metres.
Well, we're in the business end here of the 41st Amsterdam Marathon, and the group still pretty strong. Still 10 athletes plus is starting to whittle down, and we're starting to lose athletes much more quickly than we have done thus far. Wilson Chebet, the 3-time champion, the latest to feel the pinch. The pacemaker has gone, his day is done, his duties are done, and we're now left for pure racing here. And we have the might of Kenya, Geoffrey Kirui, wearing 13 there, with Sami Kitwara on the right of picture, either side of the sole Ethiopian, Mule Wazihun, 22 years old. He's an unknown quantity here, making his marathon debut. And just a little bit of a gap, Martin, opening up now between these three and the rest of the group.
It's certainly stringing them out, isn't it? And you can see now that the kick's coming from the front. And I do like the look of Geoffrey Kirui there on the left. Mule Wazihun, the Ethiopian, another athlete who's run well within himself here. He really just responded to all the moves that have been made. Sami Kitwara now on the right there, fastest man in the field, 2:04.28. But he's been showing towards the front for quite a while. Bernard Kipyego, he's not done yet. You can see him running alongside there, Amos Kipruto. But the race, as far as Wilson Chebet is concerned, he has dropped a long, long way back. You can see him right in the background there, just in front of the fella on the bike with the fluorescent yellow jacket. That is Chebet, the course record holder. Well, he won't be winning a 4th Amsterdam marathon, although I think in all likelihood his course record will remain at the end of the day.
Yes, I think that course record is pretty safe as they just go under the main railway line into Amsterdam main railway station. They're going to emerge, as you can see, into the sunlight there just before 35 kilometers. In the next few minutes we'll get the latest split, and then it is pretty much a straight route all the way back towards Amstel Wensweg and down towards the Olympic Stadium, where they started running just under an hour and 40 minutes ago.
Well, we don't know too much about this Mule Wazihun, do we? Haven't seen him running too much at this level before. He did finish 5th in the Dubai Marathon this year in a lifetime best of 2:05.44, which is very, very strong indeed. He ran in the Dubai Marathon back in 2015 as well, when he finished down 11th on that occasion outside 2:10. He has won the Paris Half Marathon just outside an hour, 1 hour and 8 seconds. And well, he did finish also 8th in this year's World Half Marathon race, so he's been building up for this sort of performance. And there is Wazihun wearing 5 in the middle, alongside Geoffrey Kirui on the left as we look, Kitwara on the right. And also making quite a bold move there is Daniel Wanjiru.
Just about managing to stay on the coattails of these leading three is Wanjiru, and then, as you can see, even allowing for the foreshortening, quite a gap now opening up to the chasing 4, which includes the defending champion Bernard Kipyego.
Yes, Daniel Wanjiru on the left-hand side there, heading for what will be, I'm sure, a lifetime best, unless something cracks quite badly in the closing stages here. His best 2:08.18. So at the moment he's certainly running a tempo that will bring him home well over a minute inside that. He's an athlete whose career until now has been largely associated with racing in Prague. Twice the winner of the Prague Half Marathon, breaking 60 minutes on both occasions. His best time at the full marathon coming, what, 2 years ago now in Frankfurt, when he ran 2:08.18. Finished 7th in that race. It's another very fast course in Frankfurt.
Yes, it is, and perhaps doesn't get the global attention that it deserves, but it's produced some terrific performances there over the years.
Yes, Wilson Kipsang came within a couple of seconds of breaking the world record there when he made his big breakthrough.
Still running, of course, Wilson Kipsang. So the left-hand turn there, and very shortly they'll be going through 45 kilometres. Sorry, 45 kilometres. That would be impressive, wouldn't it? 35 kilometres.
Yes, heading back. There he is in 4th place, going back towards the main group. But it is Sami Khedira, fastest man in the field, in the front, on the right, alongside Geoffrey Kirui. This is the view from the chasing group. Ezekiel Chebai wearing 12. And it's now something like 25 or 30 metres up on the road, so this is quite a decisive break here. And now Daniel Wanjiru just slipping back a little, but it's Geoffrey Kirui on the left, Sami Khedira on the right. So we're reaching the closing stages, the last 20 minutes or so of this men's race at the Amsterdam Marathon. Well, it's the Kenyan triumvirate of Sami Khedira, Geoffrey Kirui and Daniel Wanjiru out in front. There are the latest splits at 30 kilometres. There's a gap of something like 30 metres or so to the chasers. And Chris, you've been doing a few sums in terms of looking at the course record.
Yes, in fact, we've had just in the last few minutes the 35-kilometre splits as well, a shade under 1:45, and on projection we're looking at a finishing time of around 2:06:35, which is about exactly 1 minute outside the course record. So any hopes of the course record, I think, are now gone, certainly in the men's race. And I think it's safe to say that barring any dramatic changes here, we're looking at a winner from one of these three. I think we can safely predict, Martin, it's going to be another Kenyan victor.
Yes, dominant and at the front, and looking at the three protagonists there out in front, well, both Kirui and Wanjiru running at a tempo that they've never run before. 2:06.5, something of that order, would see them break their lifetime best by between 1 and 2 minutes. Sami Khedira, well, he's already got the fast time in the bag. That time in Chicago a couple of years ago when he ran 2:04.28. For him, it's about getting that big marathon victory. Khedira has had a lot of success in terms of fast time. Chicago Marathon, that 2:04.28 in 2014. He's done well over the half marathon. He's broken 60 minutes, won the Lisbon half marathon this year, 59.47. But for him, it's about getting a major city marathon title under his belt. So the time will be of little concern to him. Whatever happens, as long as these men don't fall apart too badly in the last 15 minutes or so of this race, well, they are almost certain to be rewarded with lifetime best. But can they add the prize money and all the time bonuses that are associated with winning this Amsterdam Marathon? It's intriguing stuff, and you can't entirely discount the men behind. Look, 4 men, something like 30 to 35, maybe 40 metres behind. That angle does rather fall short in the distance.
This is the stage of the race, of course, where we start to try and get some sort of glimpse into the body language, into the mind of what the athletes are feeling, and that's a great shot for us to make that question, Martin. Who for you of those three is looking the most comfortable?
Well, I guess I'd have to say Sami Khedira on the right, because he's the man who certainly knows that he's covered this sort of territory in this sort of time before. The other two, well, they'll be certainly feeling very much energized by the fact that they have gone through a lot of pain barriers already, coming up towards 2 hours. They know they're in the last 16 or 17 minutes or so of the race, and they're running faster than they've ever done. But all three at the moment still looking as if they're running within themselves, but Khedira does have that little stamp of class about him.
Well, they're coming back into the centre of Amsterdam, of course, packed with highlights and tourist destinations. There's the main theatre. We saw the well-known Skinny Bridge there, which people can cycle over. And still they go. There's been quite a lot of communication, I noticed, in the last couple of kilometres between these three. Wanjiru in particular, very vocal, just giving his thoughts. There is the Amstel Hotel. So back over the Amstel River, just short of 37 kilometres now, along Toronto Brug. Heading west, for those of you who are interested, and we're heading back towards the museum square, the Rijksmuseum.
Yes, the last 4 kilometres or so of the route is territory that they've already covered in one direction or another as they make their way back towards the Olympic Stadium. Running back through the Vondel Park for the last 2 to 3 kilometres or so. And at the moment, you'd have to say, all three looking pretty relaxed, and no sign that the chasers behind are narrowing that deficit. But Geoffrey Karui, who, if required, we know he's got good leg speed. Very fine 10,000-metre runner.
Well, Kitwara giving absolutely nothing away. Karui just... maybe that's just his natural grimace, but he's looking, you would have to say on the surface of it, maybe slightly less comfortable. There is part of the chasing group with Bernard Kipyego in one on the left there, the defending champion. Going for a hat-trick of titles here. And unless he can produce something very, very special, it's not going to be for the Kenyan.
Yes, alongside him they're wearing 12, Ezekiel Chebai. And 17, that's Marius Kimutai. So the three chasers have in their crosshairs the three leaders. And this is where the three leaders have to be wary not to get caught looking at one another too much. Because before they realise what's happening, they will have one or more of these three up alongside them. And maybe just a sense now that they are starting to bridge that gap just a little bit.
And that's an interesting point here, isn't it, Martin? It's quite unusual in a city marathon or a marathon of any sort that you have these two banks of three. Often it's one or two who break clear, and then the final positions are not really interrupted. Here you've got the benefit of three chasing guys who can work together as a mini team to try and pick off the three ahead.
And the bikes moving to one side of the road. They've got to be wary here because they don't want to get caught in the middle. At the moment it's something like 30 metres. Kitwara almost as if he senses that there might be danger coming from elsewhere. Just looked over his shoulder for a couple of moments. The bikes everywhere around the leading men at the moment. But Geoffrey Karui wearing 13. Ran a very fast half marathon in Delhi last year. Finished 6th in that race. 59.38 was his time. And just to reinforce those points about his track speed, he's been a regular in the Diamond League running 10Ks. He ran 26.55 in Brussels. That's going back 5 years now. But it does go to show that he's got very decent leg speed on the track. Former African champion at that distance, as well as finishing in 3rd place in the World Junior Championships. That's 4 years ago. Geoffrey Karui, who still very much a youngster, 23 years of age. And that is he on the left-hand side, the vastly experienced Sami Kitwara, wearing 2.
Well, there we are, back where we started, pretty much in front of the Rijksmuseum. And behind that, the museum square, where, as we mentioned earlier on, some of the field events for the European Championships took place just a couple of months ago in the summer. And that is the chasing group, and 3 have become 2. These are not the leaders. These are Bernard Kipyego, who is still trying to hold on to his title, but he's still got work to do. And the leading 3 continue to lead past the Rijksmuseum, and within a few minutes they'll be re-entering Vondel Park for the final section of this marathon.
Yes, barely 10 minutes or more to go in the race. Sami Kitwara Drinks bottle in his right hand. To his right, Geoffrey Kirui, and tucked in behind there, Daniel Wanjiru. What a story it would be if Wanjiru came through here. The man whose greatest achievement, really, to this stage is finishing 7th in the Frankfurt Marathon. Had a lot of success on the roads in the Czech Republic, having won the Prague Half Marathon for each of the last 2 years, inside 60 minutes. So he does have the pedigree here to run a very fast marathon. He appears to be certainly on his way to running a lifetime best. You would certainly say the same of Geoffrey Kirui as well. Sami Kitwara has run sub 2:05, and the big prize for him is his first major city marathon crown.
Back into Fondle Park then, and they'll be in the park for 1.5 kilometres before they then start the final turn back towards the Olympic Stadium.
So the 3 leaders spread across the road. Well, Geoffrey Kirui, the first signs of discomfort there, maybe just slipping a couple of meters behind the 2 leaders, Daniel Wanjiru and Sami Kitwara. Glorious city, terrific weather, and we've still got a title to decide. And there is Geoffrey Kirui, and maybe that long time he's had at the front just beginning to tell a little bit now.
Of the 3, he was certainly looking the least comfortable, and there is a gap, and 3 is down to 2. We are down to Kitwara, who we know has the ability, has the pedigree. What about Daniel Wanjiru, though? He's got a very famous name, hasn't he? Namesake Sami, the late Sami Wanjiru, former Olympic champion.
Oh, look at that kick. That was almost a sprinter's kick. That was so impressive there from Daniel Wanjiru. Well, he's not sustaining it now, is he? He must keep on going, because that really was the sort of kick you tend to associate with a 5,000-metre race on the track. He clearly feels full of running.
Well, that was extraordinary. Very rarely do you see that in a marathon at this stage, and I wonder whether he's gone too early. They still have, what, about 7 or 8 minutes of running left, and Kitwara will not be out of this just yet. He won't be panicking.
Well, that sort of kick certainly seems to dismiss the chance that others from further back who may have been making ground on the leading 3 have of maybe winning this race. Kitwara certainly not beaten yet. They have another certainly 8, maybe 9 minutes still to go in the race, and after that burst of pace, Daniel Wanjiru, well, he hasn't really kept on going. He's certainly maintained his cadence here, but he hasn't really added to that burst. But you have to say, well, we could have a new marathon star in the making here, Daniel Wanjiru, whose greatest achievements to this point have been, well, not just at the half marathon, but in one particular city, Prague, having won the Prague half marathon for each of the last 2 years, sub an hour on both of those occasions, which, if he can bring it through, certainly means that he has the potential to run a very fast marathon. But his best marathon time goes back to Frankfurt 2 years ago, when he ran 2:08.18 to finish down in 7th place. Well, he's going to have a better finish here, and I think he could knock something like 90 seconds, even 2 minutes off that time. And now he's starting to open up that little bit more on Kitwara, and perhaps Kitwara is beginning to accept that he's not going to win this race.
Approaching 40 kilometres, just over 2 to go, and Daniel Wanjiru looking much more comfortable. That break was astonishing, really, and the gap does seem to be getting wider. What can Kitwara, the more experienced of the 2 Kenyans, what can he find mentally and physically?
Well, there certainly doesn't appear to be anything coming from behind these 2 now, does there? Daniel Wanjiru sensing that he's on his way to his greatest ever athletics victory. And look at that, he's looking very sprightly, isn't he?
He certainly is. Well, this is a terrific performance, and if he does go on to maintain this lead and clinch victory, you have to say that was a very, very bold move, wasn't it? Seemed to catch Kitwara by surprise. The acceleration, as you said, more reminiscent of something we'd see on the track.
You rarely see anything like that in a marathon, particularly at this level, when you consider how fast they're running, how fast they have been running. We're talking about a tempo that is what, 2:06, something like that, maybe 2:06.30 by the time they get to the end. But he kicked as if it was a track race, as if he was coming off the final bend.
Final few hundred metres left of Fondle Park, after which they'll turn left down Amstelvensweg. Here it is. Here's the left-hand turn. And the crowds will thicken and the noise will get louder and louder.
And that'll lift him. There's no doubt about that. And compare the two men here. Kitwara looking just that little bit laboured. Wanjiru, well, lifted by the burst of applause as he came out of the park there. And it's an entirely different running style. Kitwara, the longer stride, but the rate of striding, the cadence there of the leader, the man on the left, Daniel Wanjiru, well, you get a sense he's pulling away virtually with every stride here.
Well, this is extraordinary. He really has, and I think you're absolutely right. The crowd did its job there. They really lifted him. As he came out of Fondle Park, there was a wall of noise and instantly injected an extra few ounces of pace into the legs of Wanjiru.
So he's on to Amstelvensweg. Essentially a straight road here until the Olympic Stadium appears on the right. Running inside the tram tracks. And with each stride, Daniel Wanjiru will feel he's getting just that little bit closer to his first truly major road victory here. Half marathon wins in the capital of the Czech Republic. A 7th place in the Frankfurt Marathon. But now here, and he's still just 24. So his career remains young. And Kitwara, well, it's another very creditable performance in a major city marathon, but again, he's going to fall just short. So Daniel Wanjiru, 2:08.18 is going to be blown away this morning in the sunshine in Amsterdam. Sami Kitwara looking good for 2nd place. But Daniel Wanjiru showing no signs at all of fatigue. Well, you can see blurring in the distance there, the chasers. But Daniel Wanjiru at the moment moving further and further away from the chasers. So very shortly, the Olympic Stadium will appear, and Sami Kitwara, well, his 2nd place now being threatened by Marius Kimotai. Kimotai beginning to close in. Here comes Laban Correa, who, well, faded quite dramatically after making quite a move earlier on. That's Ezekiel Chebai wearing 12. The wheels have really come off, I'm afraid, but Jeffrey Karui. But now 500 metres to go. The stadium appearing there on the right.
Well, the streets of Amsterdam, very much his to own. And what a wonderful feeling this must be for this young man, Daniel Wanjiru, into the final few metres before he re-enters the stadium. Terrific performance.
Well, look at the clock as well. He's still got to enter the stadium and run something like 250 meters. Well, it's a measure of just how much he's picked up the pace here, because it looks like he's going to fall short of the course record, but he's not going to be too far away from it.
Well, given that the group was over a minute outside that, even quite recently actually in the race, this is extraordinary how much he's eaten into that. 2:05.36, remember, is the course record. He's into the final 30 seconds.
He's going to do it. Here's the turn into the straight. A little more than 100 meters to go. And Daniel Wanjiru is going to break his lifetime best by almost 3 minutes. It's going to be a course record. 2:05.19 or thereabouts. What a stunning last 5 kilometers from the young Kenyan. That is a remarkable run. Sammy Kitwara, well, he's just going to hang on for second place. That is Marius Kimatai coming through behind him in third. Lavan Correa has made good ground as well in the last kilometre or so. But Daniel Wanjiru, well, I reckon the closing splits over the last 5 kilometres for Daniel Wanjiru are going to make quite a bit of reading. Here comes Ezekiel Chebai. Chebai comes through in just outside 2:06. Wearing 9, that's Felix Candy. And you can see the pain being felt by Jeffrey Karui in the leading 3 for so long. Yet the time there inside 2:06.5. And for Jeffrey Karui, he will be rewarded with a big lifetime best. And here's the man who's won the last 2 Amsterdam marathons, but not today.
Not today. No hat-trick for Bernard Kipyego. Gave it his best shot, but fell off the pace at around 30 kilometers. And, well, that's started to take its toll there. But these are good times, aren't they? There's been great strength in depth today. It's an unusual race we've seen today, not just because we saw a course record, but 10, 11, 12 athletes in contention still after 30 kilometers. And that decisive break in Fondle Park with what, about 2 or 3 kilometers to go, absolutely crucial in producing the result that it did.
Oh, look at the sky. It's a glorious morning. Not a cloud. And the race for the Dutch title. And here is Khaled Chakoud, who is leading that race. Chakoud, whose best time is 2:10.52. Well, it looks unlikely that he's going to improve that, but for him, on his way to being the first Dutchman across the line. No sign at the moment of his fellow countryman, Koen Reemakers.
Well, the smile says it all. And smile he might, because that has been an outstanding performance there. The organisers, of course, will be delighted that they have a course record. It looked long and lost, didn't it, for so much of the race, particularly after the halfway point when they were around a minute off pace. But he's put in a blistering last few kilometres. There is Chakoud out of Fondle Park.
Sammy Korir uit Kenia. Ja, en inderdaad, nu zijn alle ogen gericht natuurlijk op...
He's looking remarkably unaffected by the whole performance.
17 keer Nederlands kampioen is geworden. Op de cross, op de baan, op alle mogelijke afstanden, maar nog nooit op de marathon. Hij gaat het hier...
Well, course record will bring a healthy amount of prize money with it as well.
So here comes Khaled Chakoud. Just that final stretch with the stadium up ahead on the right.
Well, just a few hundred metres to go for Khaled Shoukoud, who's looked pretty comfortable throughout this race, just starting to show signs of the effort that he's put into this now. But just one final turn. That course record prize money, incidentally, an extra 25,000 euros for Daniel Wanjiru on top of the winning prize money.
Yes, so a little more than 400 metres to go. The stadium just ahead of him on the right here. Another 50 or 60 metres or so, and then he'll take the right-hand turn. He will face the Olympic rings, the stadium which hosted the 1928 Olympic Games. The rings there on the wall. He will run beneath them into the tunnel and then into that last run of about 250 metres to the finish. So here he is. He's going to finish in just outside 2:11 or thereabouts, maybe what, 2:11:30, something like that. It's going to be a decent run. His best time to this point, 2:10:52. He's just past that, but just coming around the final bend and into the straight. And the crowd fully aware that this is the first Dutchman coming into the stadium. He's going to win the Dutch national title. To 11:24 or thereabouts. So we've got a course record winner, or a course record breaker, I should say, a new champion in Daniel Wanjiru. We've seen the first Dutch athlete through. This is the second, by the way. This is Koen Rijmakers, still out on the road. Hopefully we'll catch up with the women very shortly. That's certainly brewing up to be quite a denouement. We'll be back for the conclusion of the women's race here in Amsterdam in a couple of moments' time.
Well, he joined us just as Koen Rijmakers comes into the Olympic Stadium with just 250 metres to go. The 36-year-old will be the second Dutchman home here in the 41st Amsterdam Marathon. It's been a tough old battle for Rijmakers, well outside his personal best, but another solid performance in what is his 5th appearance here in the Amsterdam Marathon, a real home favourite. And he'll round this bend and just have a few metres to go. 100 metres to go there, you can see, into the home straight. And what a reception there for the Dutchman, Koen Rijmakers.
So coming through in just inside 2 hours 16. Well, if you went to bed last night and were hoping for good marathon conditions this morning, your prayers have been answered in every respect. It really is a glorious autumnal day in Amsterdam. Look at that, not a cloud in the sky. It's quite stunning.
Let's switch our attention then to the women's race, which is building up very nicely indeed. And Meseret Melkamu, wearing number 3, is in Fundle Park into the last couple of kilometres or so of this race. It was pretty competitive for much of the race so far today. We had all the main protagonists in there. Priska Jeptu wearing 2, Meseret Hailu. But it's Melkamu who has shown her real talent that we've seen both on track and on road that has brought her through.
Well, this will mean so much to her if she does go on to win this. Because, as I explained earlier, she really came into the marathon world with a real bang when she ran that very fast time in Frankfurt 4 years ago, 2:21.01. And when she'd done that, We thought that maybe she's going to kick on from that and get well inside 2:20 and go on to be a dominant figure. Well, it didn't really happen. She won the Daegu Marathon in 2015. She won the Hamburg Marathon earlier this year when she looked to be starting to get back to that sort of 2012 form. And, well, she's doing it here in real style. She does have that little bit of quality, which certainly, as an athlete, maybe one or two of her rivals really lack at this level, with the exception, obviously, of Priska Jeptu, but Jeptu's best days, I'm pretty certain, behind her. But Melkamu here, now 31, the sub-half-hour runner for the 10,000 metres.
And here with me, Daniel Wanjiru, the winner of the TCS Amsterdam Marathon 2016. Daniel, how do you feel winning TCS Amsterdam Marathon?
To me, I'm very happy for winning this race because I am well prepared for the winning. And as I was coming from Kenya, I had prepared for my personal best. Yeah, and I have done it here in Amsterdam, and I'm very happy for that.
Your personal best was 2:08. Today you ran a 2:05:21. Also a new personal record, a course record, and a personal record with 3 minutes. Did you expect a personal record with 3 minutes?
Yeah, to me, I was expecting it. But as I was in training, my training was very well and okay. And I was expecting it to come and learn my fastest race here. Yeah.
Looking at the race, did you have a plan?
Yeah, I had plan, but you know, in the race you can expect anything to happen. And also the weather was very nice for learning, and also this facilitated in my personal best also.
This is your first major win in a marathon. You did it in Amsterdam. How do you will remember Amsterdam?
Yeah, obviously this is very nice for me because this is my first title in marathon, and I have to remember this even in the future. And I have to come here again maybe to see whether I can do more better than this next year or another year. And also the people of Amsterdam, they are very good people because they were cheering us on the way, and I have liked the behavior of them. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your win, and we hope to see you next year again.
Thank you. Welcome.
He's saying all the right things as well, isn't he? And I must say, an stunning performance when you consider that. Almost 3 minutes off his lifetime best. And we were doing those sort of numbers and conversions during the race, Chris. He's run about 1 kilometre faster than he's ever done.
Unbelievable, isn't it? And the fact that he turned the course record around so dramatically in the latter stages, we'd almost written it off at 35 kilometres. But that injection of pace in Fundle Park was so decisive. And, well, he communicates well as well, doesn't he? He'll be a race director's dream as we switch our attention back to the women's race. So it's been Kenya's day in the men. The top three, 1, 2, 3, all going for Kenya. Will it be Ethiopia's day in the women's race? Meselech Melkamu on her way.
Yes, and again, she's looking as if she's running well within herself, isn't she? Half an hour for 10,000 metres for a woman. That is a sensational performance going back a few seasons now. She's picked up medals in the World Cross Country Championships. And here she is coming in for what will be her third major city marathon success in Europe. Winner of the Frankfurt Marathon back in 2012. She won in Hamburg earlier this year. And this her second marathon victory of the calendar year. So Meselech Melkamu, just that last 200-metre stretch or so before she turns right. Heads towards the tunnel and the Olympic rings, and then that last couple of 100 metres or so around the track.
Well, that extra quality compared to the rest of the field, with all due respect to Priska Jeptu, whose best days, as you said, are probably behind her now, has been significant here as Meselec Melkamu enters the Olympic Stadium, chased by Eunice Chumba in second place.
Yes, we also caught a glimpse, I think it was Ababech Afawalk as well. So those seem to be the leading three athletes, but Melkamu, who some way outside her best time here. She's going to end up running about 2 minutes slower than she did in winning Frankfurt 4 years ago, and well, a little more than a minute outside her winning time in Hamburg early this year. But so often at this level, it's not so much about the times, it's getting the titles. And Melkamu claiming the women's title in Amsterdam. Impressive performance.
Well, to Daegu and Hamburg, she can now add Amsterdam on a wonderful day here in the Netherlands. Perfect conditions, and she ran a pretty perfect race. 2:23.21, and officially the winning time for Meselec Melkamu.
Well, these pictures from a couple of minutes ago, the second and third women coming through. Ababech Afawalk coming through for second place, just inside 2:25.
How do you feel?
And behind her in third place, Eunice Chumba coming through in third place. Here is Eunice Chumba, former Kenyan, now wearing the colours of Bahrain. So Meselec Melkamu taking the women's title, and Eunice Chumba here coming through in third. I can also tell you that Priska Jeptu has also just come through the finish line, a shade inside 2:26. So Jeptu finishing quite well down the field here and well behind the winner, Meselec Melkamu. So Ethiopia's day in the women's race. Daniel Wanjiru winning the men's race for Kenya and setting a course record. It really was a stunning performance from Daniel Wanjiru on a glorious Sunday morning in Amsterdam. It's been quite a day.
It has indeed. It's delivered again. Amsterdam consolidating its reputation as one of the best of the second string, if that's not too uncharitable, of the world marathons behind the world marathon majors. Now we're just getting pictures of the winning time of Ababech Afawalk coming through, and Meselec Melkamu. But Amsterdam has delivered again, comfortably inside the top 10 fastest marathons, and the organisers, Martin, will be delighted, as they always are, with the new course record in near perfect conditions, let's be said.
And let's be honest, I mean, we've seen this happen again. Names come through, win big races, appear to break new ground. Daniel Wanjiru, that certainly happened today, running about 1 kilometre faster than he's ever done for the marathon previously. His biggest achievements to this point had been running in half marathons, particularly in Prague and the Czech Republic. He's come here, he's set a course record. He's run 2:05 and bits. And, well, I mean, Wanjiru, will we now see him competing at the top level at one of the major city marathons and getting among the top athletes as we look here, focusing on the close of the women's race? And this is Ruth van der Meyden, the leading Dutch athlete. But, I mean, let's just talk briefly about that performance from Wanjiru, because it's rare to see something in the last 3 or 4 kilometres as emphatic as we saw there from the winner.
I've certainly never seen it. It was very special indeed. It'll live long in the memory. And you talk about the will he go on to compete and make himself competitive at the big city marathons? Well, the first thing is, it's performances like that will get him the invitation, won't it? Because all the big city marathon race directors will be taking note. They'll see the time, they'll probably watch the footage if they haven't been watching this live with us, and he will certainly have made them sit up and take notice, and getting the invitation is the first part. Once you've got the invitation, then you can show what you're capable of doing. So the likes of London, Berlin, Chicago, New York, Boston, Tokyo, they will be all there thinking about whether Daniel Wanjiru will be in their plans for next year.
Yes, and he's also run 2:05, not on the fastest course in the world. The conditions are good, but he set a course record. He's part of the 2:05 club now, which means that carries a certain prestige. And of course, he's done it this year, so he's not looking to meet directors, or should I say race directors, and presenting a lifetime best of 2:05 from 2 or 3 years ago. He's doing it from now, having run it on a course with, let's be honest, 1 or 2 hairpin bends on it. It's not the fastest course in the world. It's very flat, despite the image you're looking at now. But he's come out here. He's the fastest ever man on the course, and certainly the manner of his victory there was really, which will have caught the attention of many people watching, because when he made that break, it was just like the sort of kick you see off the final bend in a track race.
Well, someone like Mo Farah would have been pleased with that, I have to say. But doing it in a marathon was very, very impressive indeed. This is Ruth van der Meijden then just coming into the final few hundred meters of her race, the leading Dutch woman in the race, wearing number 7, multiple Dutch champion over a number of different distances, including the cross country. 32 years old now, Ruth van der Meijden.
Yeah, she's a 2:35 athlete as well, so she's got plenty of time in hand. On a personal level, this could be a landmark morning for her as well. There you can see the area around the Olympic Stadium.
Well, it's had a good year, hasn't it? You have to say, Amsterdam. If you link together today, which has been terrific so far, with the success of the European Championships on the track in this very stadium earlier in the summer. And Amsterdam as a venue can sign off 2016 with great pride.
Yes, I think that the European Championships were just what the sport needed. Stands to reason that without many of the world's athletic superpowers there, the quality of some of the performances wasn't as high as you inevitably see at the Olympic Games. But, I mean, we created a few new stars in Europe. I mean, the likes of Anouk Vetter winning that women's heptathlon. That was a stunning competition. And just generally the quality of the event and the organisation and some of the races we saw were outstanding. And here we go now to the 41st marathon, annual marathon in Amsterdam, and it's met expectations. We've seen the fastest ever winner of the men's race, and here we have Ruth van der Meijden of the Netherlands coming in, and she's going to set a lifetime best of her own here at the age of 32. It's going to be pretty tight. Her best time 2:35.15. But she's going to come in here in, I would have thought, just inside 2:34. So she is going to improve her lifetime best by more than a minute. So the Dutch woman rounding things off here with a personal landmark.
In her first ever appearance in the Amsterdam Marathon, and getting a great reception, as you would expect. Final 100 meters, and what a moment to savour. What a moment to enjoy for Ruth van der Meijden.
Yeah, it's a big lifetime best, isn't it? Something like 90 seconds she's improved it by. That's not bad when you're into your 30s already. Not that I'm trying to write off every road runner out there who's in their 30s, but it's very encouraging to see someone running their fastest ever time, certainly at this level when they're into their 30s. So there it is, confirmation of the winning time from the men's race, 2:05.21. That is the new course record. Sami Ketwara, second place for him, seems to be forever the bridesmaid. Marius Kimotai finishing very strongly for third place. And just looking down there at some of the other names, Bernard Kipyego, the winner of the last 2 Amsterdam marathons, not really ever getting a chance in here to take the title. But once again, the depth of the Amsterdam Marathon, I think, certainly another striking feature there. The performance is inside 2:07.